In this lesson, we're going to look at how to style text or typography in your user interfaces. The first thing you need to know when it comes to styling typography for your interface is that you need a typographic scale. A typographic scale is classically known as a harmonious progression of font sizes, but it's almost like the notes on a musical scale. This will help you to create a visual hierarchy and consistency in your design. So there are multiple ways to create a typographic scale. The way that I like to do it is based on a font measurement called an M. Let's say that we've chosen 16 pixels as our base size. This is going to be 1M. 2M will then be 32 pixels in this scenario. So in the graphic on the right, you'll see that we're using a typographic scale of 1.25. So 16 pixels is going to be the body text size. Then the smallest heading is going to be 16 pixels times 1.25. In this case, that's going to be 20 pixels. The second heading size is then going to be 20 pixels times 1.25, which in this case is going to be 25 pixels. So you keep going up and down the scale to give you enough font sizes to choose from. But why not just choose font sizes based on what you think will work? Well, the main reason to use a typographic scale is that it creates consistency between different heading sizes. Now, if you're looking to create a typographic scale for your UI, I advise using a table like this one on the slide. On the left, you add the name of the specific element that you want to add to your scale. I typically do it smallest at the bottom to largest at the top. The second column has the size in pixels and in M's, and the third column has the font weight, since some of the items in your typographic scale might be bold, especially headings. Then I also like to add a column for usage where I write down where this particular item is going to be used in the interface. There's a great free tool to help you create your own typographic scale. It's called Typescale, and all you have to do to get started is enter in a base size in pixels. Usually we're going to choose 16 pixels. Next, you're going to select the scale. This will then determine how big the contrast is between the elements. So you'll see that we have a golden ratio, perfect fifth, minor third, etc. There's a whole bunch of different options for you to choose from. Now you'll see if I choose golden ratio, there's going to be quite a big difference between elements in this typographic scale. I prefer the major third scale because it gives enough differentiation between elements, but without becoming too big to be practical. Now we're going to look at choosing the right typeface. So what is a typeface? Well, it's actually the correct term for what most people would simply call a font. A font also includes the size and the style of a typeface. So when you create a UI design, you want to choose a typeface that is easy to read and that works in various sizes. The most important thing is that you have to use it consistently throughout your UI. I want you to remember back to the worst website ever that we showed in the first video. This was a great example of inconsistent font usage. I recommend that you use a maximum of 2 typefaces in your UI design. You can choose between serif or sans serif fonts. Now, I don't recommend using scripts or handwritten fonts because they can be quite difficult to read. So what is a serif? Well, serif refers to the small line or the stroke that attaches to the end of the larger stroke in a letter, like the bottom of the blue A. Sans serif simply means without serifs. Examples of serif fonts are Times New Roman and Baskerville. Sans serifs are typefaces like Arial, Helvetica, and Verdana. Serif fonts tend to look more traditional and they're often used in newspapers. But if you want a more modern look to your user interface, I recommend using a sans serif consistently throughout. So, how do you choose font sizes and weights? Well, 16 pixels is a good rule of thumb for both desktop and mobile body text. I don't recommend going any smaller than this for large sections of text. You can use larger font sizes in your scale for things that need to be glanceable, like headings, and I would also recommend steering away from condensed or thin typefaces. Another thing to avoid is using all lowercase, especially if you're using small font sizes. Usability studies have shown that readability actually goes down when text is written in all lowercase. Finally, use bold sparingly to emphasize key areas of text. A good example of this is to make cards and page headings bold and have most of the other text on your page the normal font weight. So let's take a look at text alignment. As I mentioned in a previous video on visual hierarchy, left aligned text is generally easier to read than center or right aligned. This is particularly true in countries that read from left to right. So here's an example at the bottom of the slide. Which one reads easier to you? Now let's look at line spacing. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which also include the contrast ratio recommendations, recommend setting your line height or line spacing to at least 1.5 times the font size. So what does this mean? Well, if you look at the examples below, you'll see that the font size is 16 pixels with 1x line height. So the line height for the text on the left is also 16 pixels. 1.5 times the line height is going to mean that the line height is now 16 pixels times 1.5, which is 24. You'll see an example of this on the right. This adds more breathing room between text and also helps to improve readability. The final thing to consider when you're styling your UI is to choose a line length that is easy for users to read. The number of characters in a line has a big influence on readability. The optimum length also depends on the device that the user is using. Mobile devices have a shorter ideal line length than desktop, but between 45 to 80 characters is a good range for all devices. On the left is an example at 71 characters per line. The text on the right is over the 80 character recommendation, and you'll notice that the lines become too long and quite difficult to read. Join me in the next lesson to take a deeper look at how to use white space in your interface designs.